Hello friends and welcome to the news. And there's just one item today, and you may already have heard, but the new version of Morevna is out and it has their new assistant tool in it. So you can download that today, and you'll find a link to the Morevna site in the description below. So the assistant tool was originally requested by Orphanlast through Bounty Source after he'd used the assistant tool in Critter, and was mostly funded by him nearly a year ago, so many thanks from all of us to him for starting this off. So you can download the Morevna version from their site by clicking the download link. Just choose your version, and I chose the portable version. And this is so I don't have to install it, and it doesn't clash with my installed version. It just runs from wherever I place the unzip folder and uses the project folder that's beneath that location. And if you do decide to install it, it's probably best just to take a backup of your current projects, just in case there's an issue during install. And then you've got the option of making a contribution to the project by typing the figure in here. Or if not, just enter 0 and then hit the download button. And then you'll be asked for your email address, and then you get a link sent to that email to download the installer. But for my portable version, I just downloaded a zip file, I unzipped it, and then I run it from the batch file that's in the root folder. So what is the assistant tool? Well, it's a way to have OpenToonz act as a drawing assistant, guiding your lines so you can make more precise drawings, and is useful for background and props drawing, especially when in perspective. And the Critter assistant tool has 9 different types of assistant, and OpenToonz only appears to have 3, but you can create most of the same assistants in OpenToonz by changing the options. So it's a really good implementation and is making me want to start drawing backgrounds with it, which is a feat in itself. And there's a couple of videos made by the Morevna team that you can see on screen, and I'll link them below in the description showing some of what you can do with this new tool. But I've already had a quick play and would like to share what I've learned so far with you. And I'll be demonstrating each assistant, and to help I've added links to each section below in the description so you can skip back and forth more easily. So let's create the first assistant. And to create any assistant, you click on the Assistants tool on the left hand side here, and then make sure you're in a blank column, and then choose the assistant type. So we'll choose line, as that's the simplest one first, then click anywhere on the screen where you'd like the assistant to start, and you notice a column's created for this assistant, and this column is used for all assistants, whichever frame you create them on. And the column is just for holding the assistant, so you can't actually draw in it. So now I've added an assistant on screen, you see 2 controllers you can use. Click on the first one, which is the plus, which is the start controller, and then the one with the dot is the end controller. So move them to where you want the line, and you've got a few options on the top here. You can disable the assistant so it no longer works. You can change magnetism, which is how closely your drawn lines stick to the assistant, and 1 is fully sticking to the line, and moving down to 0 is not sticking at all, and then move it anywhere in between and your line will stick quite close to it. But for what I'm doing today, we'll push that up to 1 to actually draw along the lines. And if we use the default option and create a new column, and you can use any of the level types to draw with the assistant, so I'll choose a Toonz raster. And if then select a pen, on the Toonz raster, as you draw, it'll draw directly on the line. Let's make this larger, just so it's really clear, and then wherever your pen is, it draws along that line. I'll undo those. So to make changes to the assistant, you select back into the frame on the assistants column, and I'll just rename this so it's really clear. Choose the assistant tool, and then you can select on the tool to highlight it, and now you've got the options back. And you can choose to restrict the line to not go any further than the A point, which is the left hand side plus marker, and you'll notice that the guideline stops at this tool point. You can restrict the line at point B, so you can now only draw a line between those 2 points, or you can leave them both unticked and you can draw the line as long as you like. You can tick the parallel button so that you can draw lines parallel to this one, so you're not drawing directly on the line, you can draw along that same direction but anywhere on the page. And if you tick to show a grid, it shows an example grid of where the lines could appear, and you get 2 more markers on screen. The first one is kind of like a target site. That lets you show where the first grid line is relative to the first assistant tool line, and then the second marker allows you to set the difference between each of the lines to make the gaps larger or smaller. And if you tick perspective, the lines are shown in perspective, so they're closer together nearer the top line, and then further apart as the lines come towards the camera. But we don't want perspective today for what I'm drawing here. So let's click back onto the drawing column, select the pen tool, and you'll see the grid. Now you can draw the line anywhere on the screen. It doesn't have to be on the grid, but it will go left to right. So I'll choose here just to draw a line there. I can draw over one of the guidelines or in between them for as long or as short as I like. And as soon as the pen touches the paper, you can move it up and down and the line will still only go left to right. So I'll just undo those a second. And most of the time you won't want lines in one direction, so you'll want to add more than one assistant. So back to the assistants layer, select the assistant tool, and we'll add another line assistant. And we'll put that started here. We'll drag the second mark around to make it an angle of about 45 degrees. I'll add the parallel option again, so I can draw the line parallel to this, and it could be anywhere on the screen. And I'll show a grid, which I'll just set up diagonally here. And setting up the grid looks more complicated on screen when you're watching somebody else doing it, but when you do it yourself, the markers all make sense and you'll figure out exactly where you want the lines to be. So if I go back to the drawing layer, pick the pen tool, I can now draw left to right or diagonally along that line. And again, the grid lines are there just as guides. You can draw in between the lines or on them. And the software is really good at picking up which of the two directions you're going in. But the more assistants you have on screen, obviously the more difficult it'll be for the system to realise which line you're trying to trace along. So do be careful on that. So if we go back to the assistants column, choose the assistant tool. So what happens if we want to change where the assistants are? Well, very easily you can just select on any of the little marker nodes and then adjust them. So there's the horizontal line, I'll just slightly adjust there. And now the next few lines you draw will follow this assistant. And if you want to delete them off screen, once one's selected, like these sections are all shown in blue, or if I click on the other assistant, they're shown in blue, hover your marker over it and press the delete key. And that assistant will be deleted. But if there's a chance you might want to draw more lines later using the same assistants, so they're in the same direction, I'd be tempted not to delete them. And what you can do instead is to create assistants on a separate frame. So this is one of the benefits of having assistants in a column. You can create different assistants on different frames. So now I'm on frame 2. I can again choose a line assistant and add it for drawing vertical lines. And you go between frame 1 and frame 2, you see the different assistants. And the assistant frames operate like any drawing. So you can click and drag on the drag handle so that the assistant lasts more than one frame. So as you go to frame 5, 6 or 7 here, you can still see the vertical assistant. Or on a frame you can press the Q and W keys to change the number from assistant drawing number 2 to assistance number 1. So you can go back and reuse them with other drawings. One final thing, to be able to create a new assistant frame, you need to have an option set in your preferences. So if you go to the preferences, look at the drawing tools, and auto creation needs to have the settings be enabled or use XSheet as animation sheet to be able to create a new frame on the XSheet. If it's disabled, you won't be able to create a new assistant in the next frame. So we'll change that back to enabled. So let me show you quickly how you might use the line assistants. And I'll just add a horizontal line assistant and a vertical line assistant, and for both of them I'll show the grid and space it out to give me a rough idea of where I want to draw the lines. And all I want to do is draw a very simple wall pattern. And obviously there's other ways of drawing this, but it's just one example of how you can use the line assistant. Oh, and there's one last thing I want to mention. On the line assistant, as there's so many controls to move about, you can move them individually by clicking and dragging, but if you hold the shift key as you drag one of them, all 4 of them move at the same time, so you can place where you want them to be on screen a lot easier. Okay, next is the Ellipse Assistant, and this is fairly straightforward. So again, you go into the Assistants column, select the Assistants tool, choose Ellipse, and click on screen. And now it very simply just gives you an ellipse that you can trace around. Unlike the line tool, you can change the ellipse to any size you like, and you can draw around it there. And obviously you haven't got to draw around the full ellipse, so you could use it just to create partial lines, or curves. And as with any of the assistants, you can use any of the drawing tools that you can on a normal screen. Change the colour, change the size, and then as we draw, we can start off light and go thicker and then back to light again. So you can change the thickness of the line as you trace over it. So let's take a quick look at the options for the ellipse, and again select the tool, select one of the noggins to move, and if I just undo those drawing lines, it'll be easier to see what we're setting up. Okay, so you can move the centre point to anywhere you like, and with the two circles on the outside of the ellipse you can change the size of the ellipse, either make it taller and shallower or wider and thinner. But with this coloured in option you can click and drag it to rotate it to make the ellipse point in different directions. And we've got a similar number of options on the top toolbar here. So if we turn on the grid, you'll see the grid of where ellipses might be drawn with this current setting. You've got the same two controls as you had with the line, where you can change where the first line will be, followed by the distance between each of the lines. If you turn on perspective, again it gives you a slight perspective where the lines are closer together near the centre, again spaced further apart as they go away from the centre. You've got two options to restrict A and B, and if you tick restrict A, then the lines will only go from left to right around the ellipse, and if you tick restrict B, the lines will only go north and south. If I just resize this slightly and change these, you should start to see the grid again. There we go. So you can see exactly where the lines might go. And if you tick them both, then you're restricted to drawing exactly around that one line that you set up on screen and not in between at all. So if we leave it on restrict A and then start drawing, you'll see you can draw around the full ellipse or around part of it, but your lines won't go any wider than you can see on screen. Likewise, if we move this over here, change its size slightly and restrict on B, then when we draw, the lines will go around the ellipse and you can change the width but not the height. The final option we can apply to this is to repeat the oval so the ellipses sit side by side. So as you make this smaller, you can see you have multiple ellipses going left and right, or if I restrict on B, up and down. So if we draw over these, you can see you've got a number of them stacked on top of each other. Now I'm not sure why you'd want this, but it's an option. And we'll use ovals in a bit to draw fisheye perspective, but first let's look at the final assistant, the Vanishing Point Assistant. So the Vanishing Point Assistant can be used for a few different things, but basically it makes all the lines you draw all head towards one point. So you can use it to add lines surrounding a character or coming out of the sun, for instance. So again, select Vanishing Point from the assistant type and click on screen. And now as you move the cursor around, you can see all the lines go towards this centre point. So if I select it and take a look at the options, so at the minute you see a line going from where your mouse pointer is to the centre and not beyond. So you can only draw a line up to this centre point from any direction. If you tick the box that says pass through, then the line can be drawn right through that centre point to the far side. And again, you can show a grid, and that gives you an example of where you can draw lines. And again, these two widgets you can use to set where one of the lines is and how far apart they are. So it could be useful if you want to draw a sunburst with a set number of points. So there's 4 points and there's 6, for instance. So if we go to the drawing column, select the pen, we can now draw lines along those guides. But of course you haven't got to stick to the guides, you can draw in between them as much as you like. but the main reason for using a vanishing point is for adding perspective. And a few weeks back I shared the collaboration I organised, where I drew a room and a stick figure had to try to escape it. And I drew the room with 1 point perspective, and I did this by manually drawing perspective lines in another column and then tracing over them to draw the room. But with using this tool it'd be so much easier. So for example, if I clicked add the vanishing point here, and you can see where all the lines will go to, and the widgets alongside are just there to help you set up where you want the lines to be going to and where they reach to. So you can more easily place where the vanishing point should be on screen there. So this first point nearest the centre one is for moving that line, and the second point is for moving the centre point around that line. But again, all lines will be drawn towards this centre point, and these two widgets on either end are just there to help you decide where you can set that up for drawing the lines. And this will allow me to draw the lines that disappear into the distance to point towards this one vanishing point. But of course we also need vertical and horizontal lines. So for that we need to add 2 more assistants. And this will show how you can add multiple assistants to draw lines in different directions and bring your whole drawing together. So we've got one vanishing point, and now we need a horizontal line and a vertical line. So we just place those two as we did before, and if you want to again you can add a grid, and the same for this horizontal one, make them parallel and add a grid, and that's just to give you an indication of where the lines will be, and also helps for you to get the lines straight. So let's draw this room. And notice that as I draw this diagonal, because we've got the horizontal line set, you can see a horizontal guide moving with me, and make sure it aligns exactly with the corner of the wall on the left hand side. And now as I draw the horizontal line, they will definitely meet. And again, as I draw this wall up, I can watch the horizontal line and make sure it joins up with this left hand side corner, and then they will connect. And to draw without the assistance, I'll just untick the box on the options bar that says assistance, and now I can just draw straight as I would do normally. There we go, so much easier. And as we've just seen, you can have multiple assistants on the screen at once. So to draw a 2 point perspective, you simply add 2 vanishing points. So we're in the assistants column, select the assistants tool, choose vanishing point, add one on the left, choose another vanishing point, and add one at the same height at the right hand side. And again, I'll make a few small adjustments here just to show the line on the screen and help me set up where I might be drawing this. So we'll tick pass through so I can draw the lines where I like, and now show a grid. And the same for this one, pass through and the grid. So let's adjust the grid to make the lines closer together. And also, of course, I want to add a horizontal line and a vertical line. And if you want to, we'll make them both parallel. And if you like, you can show a grid for that as well, but it will get quite busy as you add all of these grids, so you might not want to show too many of them. Or you might want to just make sure you space them out. Yeah, that's quite busy. So I'll hide both of those grids. So I forgot to tick the assistance button, so I'll tick that, and then let's start drawing. And again, as with the line, instead of moving the assistant 1 point at a time and trying to line it up, you can hold the shift key and move them all in one go to reposition where you want the centre of the assistant to be. Finally is drawing fisheye perspective, and there isn't a dedicated assistant for this, but you can build one up out of the assistants we have. So again, in the assistants column, choose the assistant tool, and we'll add an ellipse at the centre. We'll make it very tall and very wide. We'll restrict it to the A region, which is for drawing left and right lines. I'll show the grid. You can see the lines going left to right. And then we'll add another ellipse, again at the same centre point. We'll make it the same height, the same width, but on this one we'll restrict it to B and show the grid that way. You'll see you've now got a grid spreading across an ellipse there. And finally, we want to add a vanishing point, which we'll add to the centre. And we'll just drag these out of the way. Doesn't really matter where we place them. Okay. And fisheye perspective is basically looking at the world and seeing 360 degrees at the same time. So the common way to see this is a city scene drawn from above. So let's draw that. Anyway, so you get the idea there. So that's just a sample of what the assistants can do. And you could of course just draw your background in Krita and import the drawing, but if you want to draw all your backgrounds and assets in OpenToonz, or if you want to animate them using the assistants to help guide you, then this could be the way to go. And in a professional's hands, you'll be able to make some incredible drawings with them. And one last thing to mention is that the Morevna version of OpenToonz doesn't yet have all the latest fixes that version 1.3 does, but you can always work in both versions, using Morevna whenever you want to use the assistants, and your current version to get the latest bug fixes and other features. But I'm sure they'll both merge features at some point. But that's it for today. A huge new feature in Morevna's OpenToonz. Why not give it a go and see what it can do for you? And as always, subscribe for more news as it happens, tutorials and animations. Now that's a guarantee.